No, BRICS is not 50% of the global economy. BRICS is 24.6% when you combine all five countries together. Now, to compare that to the US alone is 25.11% of the global economy. So, five countries of BRICS, 24.6% of the global economy. The US by itself, 25.1% of the global economy. So even when you combine all of those countries together, the US is still larger in terms of percentage of the global economy than all five BRICS nations. But let's continue to break down what's going on with BRICS itself, starting with the way they trade. Because everyone says that they're moving to their own currency, they're stopping the dollar. The reality is that's not true. Brazil is dependent on the dollar pretty heavily. 90% of Brazil's export invoicing is denominated in US dollars, even when the United States only receives about 17% of Brazil's overall exports. Moving to India, 86% of India's imports rely on the US dollar invoicing, despite only 5% of India's imports originating from the US. 86% of India's exports are invoiced in US dollars, while only 15% of it is in India's exports went to the US. So even when India is trading with other countries, they're using US dollars, whether it's imports or exports. When you talk about Central, East, and Southeast Asian exports, which includes China, 80% of total imports and exports are invoiced in US dollars. That is literally China and the backyard of China. Only 20% of China's exports and imports are settled in yuan. That's not dominance. That's not even on its way to dominance. Let me continue to tell you about what's going on with these countries. Countries with the largest dollar reserves. China, number one. They have $4 trillion in US dollars when you also count Hong Kong in that, for which they provide 550 billion. India is number 4 holder of US dollar reserves. They have 632 billion in US dollar reserves. Russia, number 5, surprisingly, they still have a huge amount of dollar reserves. They hold 576 billion. This is all data as of July of 22. And then number 10 is Brazil. So here's the deal. 4 of the 5 BRICS nations are also in the top 10 of dollar holders, and 3 of the 5 BRICS nations are in the top 5. 60% of globally held reserves are US dollars. BRICS, when you combine them, their currencies, what is their global reserve status? How many do other countries hold in reserve? 4%. 4%. When you combine Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, they make up 4% of the globally held reserves. The United States alone is 60%. So no, everything you just said is wrong. And I'm going to continue pointing this out until people start getting it. The US is not going anywhere, and neither is the dollar.